Good afternoon, and welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, July 10th, 2024. My name is Drew Clark. I'm the editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast. Super happy to welcome you to a very, very exciting topic. This is one of our favorite topics at Broadband Breakfast, talking about open access networks. But before I get to our panel, our esteemed panel, I want to I actually got a couple of show notes, if you don't mind. We are very, very excited about this event today that will start shortly, in particular because it's a bit of a prelude to our next in-person event in Washington, D.C. That will be the Digital Infrastructure Investment in-person event. It'll be our 6th annual digital infrastructure investment. So really, really excited. We did them in 2020, 21, 2 in 2022, and also last year. And this year, this conference is going to be around the theme of all in on open access. Okay, so again, today we're talking about open access. The conference is all in on open access, and we look forward to, in coming days, announcing the 4 panels and the keynotes that we'll be having. We have our first sponsor already, G-Fiber. Happy to welcome them as a sponsor of digital infrastructure investment. And just as with previous events in person that we've done in Washington as well as California, last month we did the California Broadband Summit, and previously we did the Broadband Measurement Summit in March. And then last fall, in addition to digital infrastructure investment, we had the BEAD Implementation Summit. And for each of these events, for this event right now, early bird tickets are available. Don't wait. It's $195 to get your early bird ticket. It will go up to $245 closer to the event on September 19th. As you all know, we at Broadband Breakfast believe in better broadband, better lives. We do reporting and events we do reporting every day. We do events every week on the infrastructure and the way the infrastructure is used. And we've got, again, a couple of exciting events coming up in addition to this one we're having today. Next week, we're going to be talking about crypto and the Republicans, kind of theme to the Republican National Convention, and Broadband Breakfast will be live there. And then the week after, we're going to be talking about reforming the Universal Service Fund. And again, many more we've got planned. We just have those ones out right now. These Broadband Breakfast Live Online events are free. Anyone is able to attend either in person, i.e. on Zoom, or to watch the replay. But we could not do it without the support of Broadband Breakfast sponsors. They are UTOPIA Fiber, Comcast, SmartWave Technologies, Ookla, Wesco, Coos Systems, thank you, Coos, the Institute for Local Self-Reliances, Community Broadband Networks Initiative, the California Emerging Technology Fund, which was a huge help in our California Broadband Summit last month, G-Fiber, sponsor as well of the Digital Infrastructure Investment event coming up, Broadband Now, Piranha Wireless, WISPA, Broadband Without Boundaries, and NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. All of our sponsors, in fact, our sponsors are the only people that we have as advertisers on Broadband Breakfast. We hope you look at and enjoy the advertising. I like to say, these days, most websites, they just turn their web ads over to like whoever. And I say, no, that's not what readers of Broadband Breakfast want. They want to be able to get good quality information, news, analysis, events, and information about how you can take advantage of this broadband moment we're in. And I might just also say one more quick word about the Broadband Breakfast Club. Broadband Breakfast Community is our free service available for everyone. You can, view a couple of stories on Broadband Breakfast without becoming a free member. But when you do become a free member, you get, many more stories per month. But we do limit the number of stories you can access. You normally just get the first couple paragraphs. But for those who join the Broadband Breakfast Club, our premium offering, you have access to all 7,369 stories. As of right now, it'll be 70 soon. And those are exclusively available completely. That is to say, no cutoff for our Broadband Breakfast Club members, as well as our premium content. We're now doing 2 a month of these exclusive reports, we call them. These reports are not available for those who are not Breakfast Club members. We've done the last report just earlier this week on crypto and the Republicans, but previous reports this year have included junk fees, pole attachments, privacy regulations, smart city, the smart city blueprint for urban innovation, the complexities of net neutrality, and so forth. And again, these are available exclusively for Broadband Breakfast Club members. In addition, you are the only ones who are able to access the videos of our premium events like Digital Infrastructure Investment from 2020, 21, 22, 23, and 24, as well as Broadband Measurement Summit and so forth. And you get $100 off our future in-person events like the Digital Infrastructure Investment, $195 early bird price. If you're a member of the Broadband Breakfast Club, take an additional $100 off that for $95. So we hope that many of you will consider joining the Broadband Breakfast Club. It's only $99 a month, or 51% off if you join for the year, $590 for the year. Well, with that, thank you for your time and patience as I now turn to our panel. We are going to talk about open access and what's new in open access. And let me just introduce our panel of experts, and I will introduce them in the order they will speak here. We're going to hear first from Isaac Finer, who's the Chief Revenue Officer of Koos Systems. And Koos is the company behind the BSS OSS platform, Koos Business Engine, which automates operations of fiber networks. I've known Isaac at least 10 years, I think, and we have been, in touch. He's one of the great experts on demand aggregation and open access networks and the automation of network operations. He's got a Master of Science degree in Industrial Engineering and Management at Chalmers University in Sweden, and he's coming to us from Gothenburg. Is that correct, Isaac?
Correct, yes.
Thank you for making time in your evening to be part of this. Isaac will go first, but after him, we're going to hear next from Jeff Bankston. Jeff is the Vice President of Business Development for Underline, and in that role, has 25 years of experience in a great depth of telecom industries, including fiber to the home, optical transport, routing, LTE, 5G, and cloud. He started his career at Alcatel-Lucent and Nokia, and has had roles from software development to sales leadership, as well as accomplishing the world's first 5G standalone core on public cloud with Dish Wireless. So thank you for making time to be part of our discussion and bringing, I think you're the first person from Underline on Broadband Breakfast.
Awesome.
Thank you for being with us, Jeff, and for sharing your insights. Following Jeff, we're going to hear from Brian Hollister. Don't know Brian and Bonfire as well, but look forward to that. Brian is the CEO and co-founder of Bonfire Infrastructure Group, and they are definitely making a name for themselves in the open access world. They are on a mission to eradicate digital inequality through top-tier broadband solutions, and he champions superior broadband planning, engineering, construction, and fiber operations to connect more communities faster and better. So truly embodying better broadband, better lives. So thank you, Brian, for being with us. He has more than 20 years of experience at giants like AT&T, Level 3, MCI, and Calix. So thanks again for being with us, Brian. And then batting cleanup is a Broadband Breakfast regular, Angie Cronenberg. She's president of Encompass, which stands for, I didn't learn this till recently, the Internet and Competitive Networks Association. So Internet Competitive Networks Association, Encompass. And Angie's responsible for managing the policy team and its work before federal, state, and local governments, and leads the association's efforts on membership and business development. And she's also been a real influencer on some of these complex, high-profile communications industry matters that most of us would rather forget. So thank you for being with us, Angie. And let's go in the order I just laid it out. Isaac, you're up.
Perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. So as Drew said, my name is Isaac. I am with a company called CS Systems. And Drew said we've known each other for about 10 years, and I think that's pretty accurate. We're a Swedish software company, and we built a BSS OSS management system for open access networks ground up. It was launched in 2008, and then COS was formed as a separate product company in 2011. And when you run a company out of Sweden, which is a pretty small country, after you have your office installed, then you go and look at what market to expand to. So I think that was when I joined the company and met Drew for the first time in 2012, maybe. So moving into the topic of open access after this introduction, back then we were seeing a lot of developments in fiber in the US. In Sweden, the fiber market was very mature back then, driven to a large extent by the build out of open access networks, often built by public entities, but at least in the beginning. But pretty soon the private industry sort of jumped on too, and even the biggest incumbents, what would correspond to AT&T, for example, Telia in Sweden, built their own open access networks, and many other really big players nationwide. So to us, the open access model was the norm, more or less, and we started traveling to the US, and it was not a real topic anyone wanted to speak, not about positively at least. So that was a bit surprising, because to me the model makes so much sense, and especially for certain players and locations, rural areas, for example, it's a great model. But it's been evolving, I would say, and the maybe to lead on some of the other speakers here, I see 3 or maybe 4 drivers behind this in the recent years. I think one thing, and you mentioned UTOPIA being one of the sponsors, and UTOPIA in the beginning, they were struggling a little bit. I hope the team there is not angry with me for saying so.
Oh, they're doing great now, but yeah, they definitely struggled. Absolutely.
Yeah, but now they're doing great. They're moving out of their state and they're everywhere. And I think turnarounds like that have also made an impact. But the 3 big drivers I see now, and open for anyone to think differently, but I would say one is that over the years, public entities and also grant programs have spent a lot of money into fiber to improve the infrastructure, but not always have it turned into ubiquitous builds. It hasn't benefited everyone, and I think public entities are feeling, this is a way for us where we can, if we build an open access network, we can keep the asset and have some sort of control, and without having to become an ISP, to learn all of these ins and outs of technology and business models and everything. So that is one driver I see. The other big driver I see is where investors are turning towards fiber. Now we talk about large scale investors, infrastructure investors. They are looking at fiber as a good long-term investment. I mean, no one is now questioning things will happen on the internet, right? So people will need it, and they haven't. I mean, if they are money makers, basically, they are not interested in being an ISP. They want to be, at arm lengths. They want to make sure they have a long-term steady revenue from the network, and an open access network is perfect. It's a a steady stream of wholesale revenue, and with a lot of options on the network, take rates will go up, and their business case will be good. And then the third one, I think we're starting to see a lot now in the latest years, is where, you know, maybe in the 70s, the big incumbents, they were building out their cable networks, they were basically infrastructure companies at that time. I don't know if it was the 70s. I wasn't even born, I think, when it happened. But then over time, as they had their networks, they turned more and more to you know, content and services and that kind of stuff. And then you're a completely different company from, you know, how you're measured and how you report and all that kind of things. And it's really hard to go back. So now when it's the next wave of infrastructure builds, they need to keep growing, keep getting revenue on their services and such. And I think therefore they're starting to see, well, we can expand much faster and reach new markets without having to build all the infrastructure ourselves, and are becoming more positive to open access networks. So that was my three takeaways.
Excellent summary. Excellent summary. Let's move right along to Jeff Bankston to tell us a little bit about Underline and your view of the open access market at this time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Drew. So I run our business development team at Underlined, and really where we were born out of, where we came from, was when you look at open access, which we're extremely bullish on, right? What we saw happening was this evolution from creating kind of dumb glass networks that you light up with internet service providers, and started seeing the puck moving to really a different place. And so really what we were born out of was this idea that, you know, putting fiber in a community doesn't build a flourishing community all by itself, that we really need to look at that fiber infrastructure as a platform or an operating system, if you will, that advanced applications can be built on top of. And so we've started to try to go back to first principles and say, okay, what is the true client or customer experience that we want to enable? And then how do we remove that friction? Because if you're not careful with open access and how you architect it, you can create a lot of friction in customer experience. They don't know who to call when there's problems. They don't know all the operators that are available on the system. You know, how do they get advanced applications, things like that. And so when you look at what we've built in some of our first markets, it really is trying to solve that problem of starting with the client and working our way backwards and developing an experience around that. And so some of the hallmarks and differentiators of how we approach it is, in our markets, Underline is the face to the client or the customer. And so if they have any issues, they call us. If they want to change their internet service provider, they can do it with a click of the button. They don't have to call anybody for that. And it's dig once, and then they can deliver any kind of ISP or application experience they want over that connection. And so we really wanted to start from there and offer it all on a unified bill. So everything from the network fee to the internet service provider charges to even advanced applications all come across one bill. So we're trying to create a more unified experience for clients there. But ultimately where we see this going is today communities, and we talk to all sorts of communities all the time about the problems they're facing. You know, there are a lot of communities that are saying, how do I keep the next generation from leaving our towns and cities and moving to larger cities where they get better access to remote work and remote education capabilities and, you know, advanced applications. And so today, a lot of them are very concerned about, you know, expanding internet access and solving the digital divide. You know, that's a problem for today. But what we're really starting to think about, and communities are starting to talk to us about, is internet access is a problem today. But once I solve that, in 10 to 15 years or maybe sooner, people are going to be moving out of our towns because they don't have good access to AI, or they don't have good access to autonomous driving, or they don't have access to, you know, all sorts of other things, or, you know, climate change is becoming more and more of an issue for communities of all sizes. In 10 or 15 years, they're going to be facing even more challenges of keeping up with it. So they're going to be looking for things like smart utilities and smart grids. And so you got to be smart in how you build these infrastructure networks today to enable you to do things for the next 50 years, because that fiber is going to be useful for a long, long time. So we want you to architect it correctly today put the right marketplace on top to enable that competition, that true competition, connect every segment in the community and every location in the community, and then really create a platform that you can build these advanced and flourishing communities. And so that's where we start. So you'll see our messaging tends to not just try to solve the internet, digital divide. We're also trying to solve these much larger problems.
Well, wonderful. Thanks for giving us that quick summary and for being on time. Let's go to Brian Ahlstrm to tell us a little bit about Bonfire's story.
Sure. Thanks, Drew, for having me. I really appreciate it. Our story is like a lot of companies that have been around for a minute. There's usually a 1.0 and a 2.0. And when we first started off, we were really an engineering and construction company, working with tier one providers, CenturyLink, Verizon, and others, usual suspects, if you will. But as we started to enter our 2.0 phase, we really wanted to figure out why we exist. And where we fell was, we believe all Americans deserve affordable broadband because it makes their lives better. And the word affordability really rocked us because we thought, what can we really do about affordability? And as we continued to challenge ourselves, one of my stints was with Calix for quite a long time. And when Calix went international, we started learning about open access. And, truly from a European, South Africa, Australian, standpoint, there's a lot of different countries that have now been doing it for a long time. And we started learning, what that meant. And it always intrigued me. And so as we started going down our road in Bonfire later on in that 2.0 aspect, we started researching, even more and going deeper. And like you have known Isaac or Isak, depending on what audience we're with. And we started getting more educated about the market. And we started traveling even during COVID. And we went and visited Costs, and they were gracious to help connect us with many of their clients, all from different layers of the stack, infrastructure owners, operators, ISPs, and we started just learning from them. And we started meeting with boards of various companies and, country by country, and just started trying to put all the pieces together of what's worked for one country, why didn't it work for another? And then we, of course, started looking at the US and what's working. And where there's been challenges. And UTOPIA is obviously a great one to talk about because they had to work through that evolution too. What was working in Sweden wasn't exactly going to work for them. And so they made some modifications and of course, learnings. And so we've taken a bit of all of that. And as we started thinking about this, it was like, well, how do we help our clients go to the next level? A lot of our clients, we started learning and doing more work in the public sector, tribes. They started to need a different level of help. They really needed a lot more help on the front end of it to figure out what's possible. What are the stakeholders of their community? What are they looking for? Do they want to be in control of their digital future? Have a say in it? Isaac, hit so many great points. Ubiquitous coverage is always a challenge. We know the copper cable plant's aging. DOCSIS 4.0 is only going to go so far. I mean, it's obvious fiber will be the answer in every major market. Period, ultimately. So it was like, how do we put all these pieces together? How do we help clients that are trying to go down this journey? And so what we realized was there was a need, especially in the public sector, to help them on the front end figure out what's possible, what type of business model made sense for them. And what we saw is an opportunity to help manage their assets, help bring their stakeholder dreams, make them a reality. And a big piece of it is open access, right? It's an aspect of the public has the ability to have some control of their future. They can do what they understand well, which is infrastructure. They can partner with the private sector to offer applications and services because the private sector is always going to be more advanced. And when you create a place where there's competition, you're going to drive, of course, innovation in services, and affordability, of course. And so and then, the biggest piece is Americans, we like options, we like choice. And so what we started realizing is, it hasn't been as popular in the US because we didn't come up with it, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. And we have trailed, in this sector, and it's just been different to us. Lots of entities have done pretty well building, fully integrated ISPs. But as the world's changing and it's going to a dominant fiber world, there's more applications and business models that are emerging that can work, right? And more communities want to be have some say in their community's digital future. It's a digital economy, and the paths are coming together. So we've been doing that type of work. We work with lots of different providers, some that are vertically integrated ISPs, and still help them with engineering and construction. But a lot of our work has been working with others to help them see what the possibility is of them owning their own infrastructure, right, in an open access type of format. And quite frankly, the public is in the best position to serve everyone. They can get the lowest cost of capital. And really, as you start to understand each layer of the open access stack, every piece of it can be important and profitable for each one of those entities, but each one of them has a different financial structure, right, that's in place. So
Great.
So, we believe it's a great opportunity. We're not going to say it's the only one by any means, but we think it's a really great solution. So we do a lot of our work now is really trying to educate communities on what's possible. And open access is an option when we're working with them in what we call broadband planning, is, figuring out what's possible. Do they have existing assets that can be leveraged? How much responsibility do they want in this? And if they want no responsibility, what can they do to think about helping to attract private, fiber builders to come into market, and understand that if they have no control, what can they do? So we're really trying to do as much as we can to educate folks. But what we're seeing here is the market's changing on open access. And I remember in a lot of our touring with Isaac and a lot of folks when we were in Europe with them, is that once the tier ones accept open access, it's going to be real in the US. And that's what's happened. T-Mobile, AT&T, the biggest PEs in the country are behind them, and it's a reality now. So it's a viable option for communities to consider.
You've definitely set up a number of issues we want to come back to, the stack, the different players in the marketplace, including larger incumbents. But let's get Angie into this discussion before we open it up to everyone. So Angie, tell us a little bit about Encompass's view on open access.
Great. Thanks so much, Drew, for including me in today's conversation. We're really excited that you're having this discussion today, because we've traditionally seen wholesale models in industries kind of throughout the economy. And even in the communications industry, we've seen the wholesale model be successful. In the US, we've seen it in the middle mile. We've seen it in the mobile network space with MVNOs. Right. And so it's exciting to see this discussion now happening about last mile connectivity and fiber connectivity. So I'm just so grateful to you to include me in the conversation. And I really want to focus on the policy positions. That's what Encompass can really bring to the table, as our membership is wide and it's diverse. I represent companies that are building networks, fiber, fixed wireless, mobile, satellite networks. And I also represent companies that deliver their services and applications on those networks. They buy and sell access to the networks. They're using this model to deliver more competition. And as Brian and Jeff were really emphasizing, in the US, people do want choice. And what we know is that, especially in the home and small business marketplace, there's not a lot of choice that customers have now. So as we begin to see companies like T-Mobile and AT&T look at this open access, this wholesale model where other ISPs can come to market, we think that's a really good thing. And it's going to drive more investment, more innovation, and better customer service. From the perspective of the policymakers, the other thing that I think it could really help is the deployment agenda, which is a significant part of the policy work that I do here at Encompass. Like, we want to be sure that companies get good access and easy and affordable access to poles, conduit, rights of way. They can get these agreements with the cities and the towns so they can access the roads and build the network. Well, guess what? When you're building an open access network, you're dealing with one company, right? You're not dealing with multiple companies that need this access points. And so I think that's a really attractive proposition for the policymakers too, at the federal, state, and local level. And like, look, Drew, I'm still working on getting pole attachment improvements. We do need modernization of pole attachment at the FCC as well as with the states, but it will simplify things where policymakers and companies that own the infrastructure that needs fiber attached to it, that needs towers and small cells, it will make it easier if they're dealing with fewer companies than many companies. So I'm really excited to be here. Cannot wait to dive into your questions and really kind of bring to it. I love being on this panel with the gentlemen who are coming out from a business perspective, and then I can help just highlight some of the policy issues around the business topics. So thank you, Drew. Appreciate it.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. So I want to just dive right into the stack that Brian referenced, and maybe I'm going to frame it this way. Sometimes open access is thought of as a two-level open access. That is to say, there's an owner, a network operator, and then people who are offering services on that model. And then sometimes it's thought of as a three-tier model with an owner of the asset, a network operator, and then multiple internet service providers. Let's start with Isaac. I mean, do you see any substantive difference between the three-tier model and the two-tier model? What do you see as kind of gaining the most traction worldwide?
So that is a very good question. I would say in the beginning, you often saw these two layers where you have the service providers on top, and then you have a network that was built and operated by one entity. If I look back at Sweden, that was often how it started, and it was often the electric utility that built the network because they knew about cables, right? So it made sense. What they struggled with was that, if you have 5,000 homes to serve in your small county, or maybe even more, it's hard to build in operations because running an electricity network is not the same thing as a fiber network, and you will have different kind of issues. I mean, the electricity is on or it's not, and you will have more questions when you run a fiber network. So what happened over time was that private companies saw an opportunity to come in and become an operator partner. So, you focus on the cables because that is what we operate this for you. We run the OLTs, ONTs, and all the stuff you need, and then we will also take part of your ISP community for you. And this was actually quite fantastic, because what happened was these operators, as they started to operate more and more networks, each and every one of them were small, but they were operating it with a platform like ours that made this small separate markets to an ISP be one. You reach all of these in one system. So they could attract much more providers because the providers saw a much bigger market. So I think we'll see the same sort of evolution in the US. You already, Brian is nodding, people have done their homework and they are operators willing to come on multiple networks already. But I think we'll see this grow also over time, because I think that is the most, if you aren't really big, like you run a network of, let's say, 30,000 plus subscribers, it's hard to be super efficient. And then, especially if you look at affordability, if you have, if you split this up into 3 layers and, each and every entity is really specialized on their thing, they're going to be able to do it much more efficient with tailored tools. And that's how, costs are lower, and then everyone can make money while it's still affordable to the end customer.
So what I'm hearing is 2 tiers, maybe original, but it's leading to 3-tier more places. Quickly, Jeff and
Yep.
Brian, do you agree with that? What are your thoughts on 2 versus 3 layered?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that play out real time. Our base model is kind of enabling that 3-layer and really up. If you think about the applications, that's really where we see things going. But we're working with municipalities today that are building a dark fiber network. They literally are not lighting the network. They're wanting people to bring in equipment in an open access fashion and do it that way. We're seeing some of those. We're working with partners that are doing more of a wholesale model where they don't want their name in front. They just want the ISPs to come over the top. That's closer to like a 2-layer model that you're describing. The way that we approach it is we do think the network operator, and we think this is where things are going to go, is the network operator does need to have more of a front and center role and enabling a higher quality of service, enabling a single throat to choke and one phone number and one website they can go to change providers and those kinds of things. And so, because that really enables the foundation that you can then do some more interesting things on. And so, whether you call that a 3-layer model, 4-layer model, or go all the way up the OSI stack if you want, we definitely see it moving in that direction. So we're very bullish on that.
Okay, Brian.
I think it totally depends on the market size. We're seeing, we've deployed with the Southern Ute Indian tribe, which is one of the 2 federal recognized tribes in the state of Colorado. And, it's a small network of 5,000 people or something, homes. And, but we're doing open access. They own the asset. There's already multiple ISPs on top of it. And we're making that, work in that small environment. And why is it working is that network will never become financially stable without outsourcing some components, right? To be able to do proper support 24/7, all of those types of things, the staff cost would obviously never get paid for in an environment like that. So if it's a larger community, they certainly can take on, and build out that staff to operate that network. It's all economics. And sometimes they may want a stepping stone, and we're happy to help with that stepping stone where we operate it for them, help them commercialize it, get it to maturity. And if they take over that, at a future, time, that all works for us. So it really does depend on the market, in my opinion, and what those stakeholders are looking for. And it also depends if it's publicly owned or PE owned, right? There's a lot of decision trade-offs that go into that, which just depends. And so our view of whether it's the 3-tier or 2-tier, it just depends on what's that community looking for, what are their needs, and they may, when we're hiring, obviously, to even support that community, all the technicians are local, but of course the network operations center is not, right? So that's how we can make that work, but we're hiring still within the community. And so they are still getting, local employment. It's more about what's important to you as the stakeholder that is going to be part of the major enablement factor. Whoever pays for this thing is, obviously in the biggest controlling seat. And what are the responsibilities that they all want to have, right, in it? It's a lot easier to, hire others that have done this before versus take on the risk. And the biggest issue with communities is obviously the risk of it not going well. So how do they protect the downside?
So I want to add another element to this and get Angie's and other people's perspective. What is the role that major telecommunications companies, including AT&T, with their joint venture Gigapower with BlackRock, as well as various things that T-Mobile has done. What role have those 2 major players had on this open access discussion? Angie first.
I think it's been significant to see their support for a wholesale model in the fixed broadband space has changed the industry. Drew, I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten as a result of their business decision, and now much, much more interest in seeing that in other communities. And also from the perspective of the agencies, right, that care a lot about the affordability issues, the connectivity issues. Like, I think it's a sea change for them, because when you look at the numbers right now for broadband service, so this is home small business service, that's a fixed service that the commission measures. The numbers are not great for competitive perspective. Most consumers have at most a choice of two. And the higher the speed, the more likely they have a monopoly right now. And yes, we're getting more fiber connectivity in the United States. So that's helped driving the availability of more high-speed access to customers. But the number of choices they have for their actual ISP is just terrible. And as we were talking about, people want choice, right? So it's great that we're seeing new technologies that are offering more choice, like fixed wireless and satellite, but those are not really driving a lot of switching by customers, especially in urban and suburban areas. However, seeing now that AT&T and TMobile are like much more amenable, right, to an open access wholesale type model, I think will help drive this conversation in new ways as a policy perspective, and potentially drive much, much more competition, which will improve the numbers and allow for consumers to have more choice for their ISP at their home and in their small businesses, which I think policymakers, I mean, this is not a partisan issue, right? Both Democrats and Republicans want to see more competition happen. And this is a great way to do it. And seeing how it's, just discussing the different types, right? Like seeing how these could play out in different communities, I think gives the industry, gives investors an opportunity to really gravitate to the models that are working best. So this experimentation that's happening, I think, is a fantastic thing, and I'm so happy to see it, because I have lived through some of these earlier battles about access to networks and regulated access to networks and all of that. And so it's much better, I think, to see it happening in the marketplace in a more natural way and giving companies these new opportunities to deliver services to their customers, whether it's an application-specific type service like Jeff was talking about, in the AI type service, or it's a full-on, ISP type service for customers.
So we've got so many great questions. I don't want to delay more, but so don't all feel the need to weigh in. But do any of our three gentlemen here want to say what impact AT&T and TMobile have had on your businesses in particular?
Yeah, I'll chime in here with maybe a bit of a challenge of that view. No doubt, AT&T and TMobile and others jumping in have increased the visibility and the credibility of the open access concept. So we'd love that. But I would warn anybody who really thinks open access is really the path forward to increase competition to be cautious there with the kinds of arrangements that are getting set up. These exclusive arrangements that lock down these networks for years, and it's not just the big guys, right? And it's happening with smaller ISPs as well. But when they come in and they spend the first 3 years gobbling up 30, 40% of the network, there's not much left when you flip the switch and go open access. So I would say tons of benefits there. They obviously bring great customer service and all those kinds of things, but they have such a center of gravity that they'll create a gravity well in these systems that you got to be really careful with. So I would just exercise caution, but overall, I think it's a net positive.
We've got a great question. We got many great questions, but one, and you can post questions in advance of the events now on the page for the event, which I put in the Zoom stream earlier. This is from Gary Mesh. He says, without financial subsidization of fiber builds by ISPs gaining some form of initial or permanent exclusivity, aren't network builders, operators reducing their opportunity in the market? What does the financial model say? Isaac, you've already started to answer that question, but do anyone want to tackle this question of, is financial subsidization i.e. the BEAD program, Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, as well as many other programs at the moment right now in the United States. Are they necessary? Are they a help to open access? Are they kind of really orthogonal to the issue? What do you think, Brian and Jeff and Isaac?
I think it's just another tool in the bag, but in many cases, in many deployments, it will not, hinge on BEAD. It's got to hinge on, something moving forward, whether it's private investment or the public moving forward with some type of strategy and build, and BEAD's an add-on, right? Because obviously in the denser areas of that community, BEAD will not be available. So you can utilize it to expand your network. But you really have to make it work, in my opinion, without BEAD. But why it works for investors and the communities that invest in it is that from whoever owns that infrastructure, as someone, is not happy with the ISP and they move to a different ISP as a consumer, the infrastructure owner is reaping the benefits of lower churn and higher utilization. So open access to an investor is a beautiful thing. Now, some investors, to Jeff's point, feel more confident in first having that network locked down until a future period when the exclusivity ends, because the investor feels happy that they've got a large tenant, big name, brand on that network. And that's not a wrong strategy either, right? I mean, you've got to get these things funded. We love choice. I agree with Jeff 100%. I love choice. But if that's what it's going to take to get a particular area to get fiber to the home in 3 years when it opens up, is T-Mobile or AT&T going to be a dominant player? They're going to be a dominant player if they get on that network no matter what, because no one can match their marketing power from a small ISP. They will always get more of the share because they also have more add-on services typically that they can entice the customer with, security, cell phones, right? There's a lot of fiber overbuilders that just do fiber and that's it. So.
Right. So reminder to our audience, ask questions in the Q&A tab, and I'm sure we're going to have more discussions that want to go on. So go ahead and log into Broadband Breakfast and ask your questions on that page, and our panel will contribute to this. I said, Angie, first, you still want to say something? And then
I just wanted to, yes, thank you. I just wanted to flag a policy issue here. And that is in the NTIA NOFO to the states, they did encourage them to adopt an open access wholesale type model. And several of the states, a couple handfuls of them actually have,
You still there? We lost her. I'm so sorry. Can we still hear you, Angie? Go ahead. But you're on mute now, so I can't hear you.
Several of them have adopted that as part of their planning process for BEAD. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out over time and maybe how many states, get players into the marketplace who are going to be offering this open access wholesale type model. I just wanted to flag the policy issue that we are seeing that.
Isaac, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this thing with an exclusivity period, if the ISP is really involved in funding it, it might be necessary, as Brian said. Otherwise, I think it will go away. In mature market, you don't see it at all. I think this is sort of a misconception because people think of building a fiber network is 30-40% take rate, maybe 50, even 60 if everything, the sun is shining and it's downhill and everything is perfect. But really what happens is when you have more choice on the network, you will see greater take rates. So like Brian said, this big incumbent, they will have their share of the market. That doesn't mean that there isn't any market to pick up for others. But as an example, we have the similar company to AT&T, Telia in Sweden. Typically, they have at least 1/3 of the market on open access networks, 30%. Most expensive always sometimes twice as expensive. So this race to the bottom thing, that's also just a myth. That's not how it works. People buy the brand, someone they trust, someone they've had forever. And what happens is there is still, because the take rate is 90%, so there's still 60% to pick up for the other ones. You're not competing against, the other ISPs. Well, you are, but you're also competing against their other alternatives, only using their cell phone because they don't like their providers, using that old cable, DSL, whatever they can have because they hate that particular provider and they would love to switch to another one, and then they would be on the infrastructure. So this is infrastructure competition, you have to remember, and the norm on open access is not 30% take rate. It's you want those providers in the beginning to quickly reach 60, 70, 80% take rates. Wow. So it's an FTTH, it's a take rate game. People think it's, ARPU. That's the key measure because you're gonna get 30%. So the ARPU has to be high. It's not in open access.
There's so much here. I almost wish we had 2 hours for this, but Louisa Kalimpong asks a great question. What are some best practices for municipal broadband where open access helps with cost sharing of operations and maintenance? For munis, is dark fiber preferred always, or is there an advantage to selling lit capacity? So Jeff or Brian, do you want to weigh in on those questions there?
So the conversations we've had with munis and counties and whatnot is really bringing partnership to help them run and sell these networks. We've seen several cases where municipalities will build their own network and think they're going to be able to sell it. But in reality, that takes a special kind of a skill set that either ISPs or folks like ourselves can bring to the partnership. Not every municipality can pull that off. And so I think, they really need. So to just go out and put out a dark fiber network, we're talking to one municipality right now that did that. After a year, they hit 20% or so penetration on the network, which is great. But there was zero advertisement, zero customer facing stuff. And just imagine how much more they could do on that network if they were actually actively selling it or had ISPs that were actively selling on it. And so we do think that one of the best practices is make sure you pull in a partner who's helping you understand how you can go to market and position the network. I served on a panel a couple of weeks ago where one municipality said, hey, the number one challenge we had is the ISPs we brought in, they didn't market very well. And that was a challenge that they just could not overcome because the ISP partners that they chose or that come on in the system just weren't very good at that. And so I would say, whatever the model you go with, make sure that the partners you're bringing in can bring that skill set and actually sell the network. You don't just turn it on or put up a city website and suddenly you're going to drive penetration. That's not how it's going to work.
Okay. Isaac, I see you've got your hand raised. So go ahead and respond to this if you don't mind.
Yeah, I hope I'm still on topic, but if you're a public entity, community of some sort, and you have the chance to get BEAD money, instead of handing that BEAD money out to a private partner who will be looking for profit, you should consider seeing the BEAD just as a means of strengthening your business case, because now if you take that money, but you still have, ubiquitous access as your goal, you can build a network and you don't have to, like a private telco, telecommunications company, they need to make profits off of that network because that's everything they have. A community, they have their revenue from their tax base. So if you're a community, everyone knows if we get fiber in here, people will stay, companies will grow, people will move here, companies might move here. It's going to make a huge difference financially for the city, not on that revenue on the fiber. That's peanuts. That's nothing in this context. So if you think about open access, take that BEAD money, invest some money into building this network, give the operators and the ISPs a low fee to be on the network so that they can be competitive out to the market and drive uptake and take rates. If you build a fiber network as a community, you want everyone to use it. Well, that is the goal. The goal is not to make money off of that network directly as a public entity. It's the other benefits. And that is where there was another question about the urban communities or counties. That's exactly the thinking you must have. There will never come a private company and build it because the business case is not there. For you, the business case is definitely there. Just it's a different line in the whatever it's called, the financial model.
Right. We got a question that I want to ask Brian. This is about doing business with a tribe, but some members have skepticism about doing business with the tribe because of protections that the tribe receives. I'm not 100% sure what the questioner is asking, but since you have worked in this space, I'm wondering if you could speak to questions about any particular unique aspects of doing open access with tribal nations.
I think probably, Drew, it's more about the questions probably should be better phrased around just simply working with tribes in general, because I think a lot of our industry has not. And obviously there hasn't been a lot of investment on sovereign land, tribal sovereign land from a communications perspective. Across the 550 plus recognized tribes out there, and now there is obviously a lot of dollars that's already been awarded. I think over 2 billion, right? And another billion or so that will be pushed that only tribes can apply for from a broadband perspective. And I guess what I try to do, because we have several tribal customers now, is like all communities, you got to go and try to understand what your services are and how you could support their initiative. And what we see with tribes is tribes really need help in understanding what are the options at play. But I think people need to understand that tribes are their own government. And the question, Drew, really comes from, well, if they decide to not pay me, what can I do? They're their own country. Well, I think there's lots of ways, to work through that through just an appropriate, payment structure that, can work around those types of issues, which most tribes understand and are willing to pay, some of those dollars up front if that's giving someone concern. But in our work, we love working with tribes because we just get such a huge, impact and just the humanitarian work that we're doing, because they need so much help. Not all tribes, obviously some have done really well in this area, but I would say the majority need a lot of help, and there's a lot of opportunity, and we try to do what we can to inspire the industry to work with more tribes, because there's a lot of opportunity in working with them, but they need people that are going to be able to come to the table and help formulate and help them with their entire plan. And just like working with the muni, they take a long time to ultimately get that plan done. But when they start moving forward, it's way more solid than, and lots of times working, with a PE-backed company that, anyone can have a new decision and just stop the build at any given time. Once the community, whether tribal or municipality, commits, they're fully in. So they take longer to develop, but we believe in the long run, they're the best clients to have. And we love working with them. So I'd like to do it.
The hour has clearly just sped by, and the good thing is we're coming back to this topic. We're all in on open access at Digital Infrastructure Investment. So get your pre-order now, your early bird tickets for that. I'm going to throw in one final question and give each of our panelists in the same order we started in the chance to react to. But feel free to take any of the other questions. There's still many others in the Q&A tab. This is Keith Quarles' question about, I am seeing a growing number of open access networks, quote, in name only, meaning an anchor ISP only. What is the group's perspective on this trend, and anything else you'd like to say about what we can expect to see with open access networks in the coming years? And we'll start with you, Isaac.
I think since this is new, these networks use one tenant because it feels safe. And I think they will quickly realize that, we could have so much more take rates and so much more revenue from our infrastructure investment if we had more providers, and many of them will open up when they can.
Okay, and thanks for being with us, Isaac. Jeff, what are your thoughts on either this question or any of the other thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, no, I agree with Isak, what he said there. and I stated my comments earlier on kind of where I think we need to be cautious, but really, when you open up technology and you open up platforms, you create this great test bed for new technologies and new innovations to come. And so if you're going to dial it down to one exclusive provider on a network, you've eliminated that innovative capability. So really, that's where I think the true power of this is going to come over the coming decade. So you need to make sure you encourage that competition and innovation to happen.
I would agree with both of them. I think over time, Drew, you'll see this exclusive aspect go away, because the investors will obviously continue to get educated and see that their investment is more protected by having more people sell on their network and utilize it more. But a lot of times it comes back to what's that engagement. There may be a financial partnership involved, like AT&T, BlackRock, that obviously is driving other components. But I think over time they will certainly open that network up too, because they will see the value. AT&T will see the value that they can still compete on their own on that beautiful fiber asset, and smaller providers will find their niche and being able to compete and win a business away from them, and especially away from the legacy technologies that they currently have.
Well, Angie, you get the last word.
Great. I like to remind everybody that competition is the law of the land here in the United States. And we do have a federal agency who is responsible for studying it, and that is the Federal Communications Commission for the broadband and telecommunications industry. They do have a report that they do every other year called the Communications Marketplace Report, and it encompasses, we're encouraging them to look at these new developments for these services and really study it so that we can all understand it, the different flavors that we've talked about of open access. I think that the policymakers need a much better understanding of what's going on, and that will help also with the industry and consumers and customers to understand what's going on. So I will leave it at that. Thank you so much, Drew, for having me. It's been great to be included in this panel and have this really wonderful deep dive into this topic.
Well, like I said, there's much more to come, and don't forget to join us at our Broadband Breakfast Live online next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time for discussion of Republicans and crypto. On behalf of our panelists, Isaac Finner, Jeff Bankston, Brian Hollister, and Angie Cronenberg, I'm Drew Clark, and we'll see you next week.